Welcome to Mexico Centered. I'm Tony Payan, your host and director of the Center for the U.S. and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy in Houston, Texas. Political cartoons are as old as politics itself. The craft, which is an essential part of journalism broadly speaking, although situated at the intersection of art and politics, is in fact a way of offering visual commentary on political figures, events, or issues using techniques that can quickly point out the absurd, the nonsensical, the controversial, the irrational, and the contradictory in politics. Political cartoons are opinion pieces as powerful as an opinion column, graphically exposing the real motivations and interests of political and social actors by using hyperbole, satire, exaggeration, caricature, analogy, stereotypes, or ridicule. Political cartoons are particularly effective against distortions of democracy, including the emergence of populism, authoritarianism, and absolutist ideologies. Mexico has had its share of political cartoonists, often constituting one of the few resistances to the emergence of autocratic figures, right or left. One of them, my guest in this episode, Francisco Paco Calderón, has produced political cartoons sketches for 50 years, capturing much of the political and social realities of Mexico today. Thanks for tuning in to Mexico Centered, Two Countries, One Conversation. Paco, thank you very much for joining us today in this podcast. It's really a pleasure to receive you here to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
So evidently, we read the newspapers every day, and we certainly read Reforma, the newspaper, one of the major newspapers in Mexico City, and we look at your political cartoons. Tell us a little bit about what you do. How do you describe your profession? How do you see yourself as a political cartoonist and journalist?
Well, it's a lovely profession. And as occupations go, I think it's one of the best. I feel that I've never worked a day in my life. You certainly have fun. It's a job where either you have fun doing it or you're no good at it. So every day you pick a theme, you pick a victim, mostly people that you don't like, and you make fun of them. But it's not about just making fun of them, but about stressing a point, giving an opinion, try to encompass entire events into a few lines. It takes quite a skill. I'm about to enter my 50th anniversary as a cartoonist, so you'll learn quite a bit of tricks along the way. It's very fun, but it's not an easy job.
So how did you get there? Tell us a little bit about how you started. What made you first think, I think this is my vocation, this is my calling, this is what I'm going to do, I have a talent for it. And then tell us a little bit about the bumps on the road and the doubts and the questioning of your own trajectory. Talk to us about your 50 years in the trade.
Well, I've been drawing since I was a little kid. Somewhere along the line, you learn that you can do something most people can't, and you stick to it. I remember being in primary school. Someone told me, hey, you can draw. And everybody gathered around me to see me draw. So I thought I excel in this. And you start to see other editorial cartoonists, and the idea grows on you. I want to be that in life. And I remember the first day as a professional cartoonist, I was overjoyed. I said, oh, my Lord, my life's dream has come true. I'm now a political cartoonist. I'm about to make it big in the world. Okay, these are the news for tomorrow edition. Oops. And the mind went blank, completely blank. And I said, oh my God, I'm going to be a one-trick pony, one-day success. I'm going to be fired next day. What am I going to do? And you start, squeezing your brain. Something comes out. I remember it was about Spain's first democratic elections. And I made, whatever came into mind. And I thought, well, I'm just a beginner, but with time, I learn to master this profession and it'll be easy as cake. And no, every day you think, what am I going to print tomorrow? And the mind goes blank and you have to squeeze your brain in order to get an idea. There's no recipe for a good cartoon. Sometimes you imagine a good joke and you wait for the right event to stick it to that news flash. And some other time, you see the news and say, hey, I'm going to go for it. And you search for the absurd in the news. And then you search for a metaphor in order to expand the absurdity of it. A graphic example of how absurd that particular event is. And there are no rules. Sometimes you think, oh my God, this cartoon is going to make history. This is going to smash the institutions. This is going to really hit the spot tomorrow. And it goes
flat.
absolutely, yeah, completely flat. And sometimes you say, I'm going to be fired. I have a deadline to meet. The first thing that comes into mind, whatever it is, just so I can't be fired tomorrow. And that is the cartoon that makes it. I said sometimes that we cartoonists are like those German submarines in those World War II movies. You scan the horizon with your periscope, I'm going to hit that ship. You calibrate your periscope, your sights, whatever, and you fire the torpedo, and then you run to the sonar, and you hear, if you hear, you son of a bitch, you bastard, how dare you, blah, 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 I hit the bullseye. If it goes, it was a blank.
So obviously you have a talent for drawing, and I think that's the basic talent that you have, but you could have been an artist drawing other things. Why humor? Because at the end of the day, on the basis of your talent, you built a humoristic or a humor-oriented career. And so what made you go in that direction as opposed to doing other kinds of drawings for art and things like that?
That's a very common misconception. Many people say, hey, you're an artist. And I said, no. But you can draw. No, I can draw my drawings. But I'm a journalist. I'm a doodler. And I can make my drawings, but I cannot make that chair as I'm seeing it right now exactly as it is.
Right.
I see it and I make my own idea of that chair and I draw it. And I don't consider myself an artist. An artist, for instance, says a panorama and said, wow, this would make a great painting. And he puts it easel and draws for the joy of it. I don't think like that. I'm a journalist. I see the news and I said, go for this, go for that.
So it's more about graphic journalist.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We cartoonists are the ugly duckling in journalism, at least here in Mexico. People say, yeah, you're not a journalist. You just draw funny pictures. And I said, no. I have to do, you do, only I have to do it in a few lines and with drawings and make people laugh.
It is a custom.
Try to do that.
Piece, but in the form of a graph drawing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I've never painted an oil picture. I never painted in a watercolor. Never in my life. I've always made cartoons.
So let me ask you, but would classify yourself as a journalist. But when I look at the cartoons and the 50 years that you mentioned you've been at it for so long, beyond a journalist and a political cartoonist, a graphic journalist, you're also a historian. I mean, in your drawings, you're leaving a trace of all the different events that have occurred in the country for 50 years.
I'm a history aficionado, but I'm no historian. My dad was an economist and a historian. I'm neither. But after meals, I've listened and it comes natural to me and I love it. I mean, as I said, as an aficionado, I'm not a professional historian or whatever.
But have you ever thought about putting together a coffee table book called A Graphic and Humoristic History of Mexico over 50 years, and then doing this, showing these different cartoons over time so that people can say, I'm looking at Mexico's history from the eyes of a graphic journalist, a humorist that's teaching me all the irony and all the, ridicule of Mexico's history, recent history, something like that.
Well, given the political climate here in Mexico, when they fire me, then I'll have the time to do that book.
I mean, it's something that I would certainly put on my coffee table and in the living room and sort of look at it, because I think of it as history. I mean, I saw you speak at a conference in Mexico City recently, and you showed the cartoons going back to López Portillo and then De la Madrid and then Salinas and on and on. So there's, I guess, a sense of history in the drawings. It's not just the present.
Well, it's a compilation of my work. When you draw a cartoon, you're not thinking I'm making history and this is for the ages. I'm making a cartoon of that particular issue, that particular day. But as time goes by, you look back and you say, hey, I was right on this one, I was wrong on that one. And yeah, it makes quite a funny compilation or a graphic history, humorous history of misfortunes here in Mexico.
I want to ask you a question that I had actually asked you in Mexico City when we briefly spoke at the conference. Every morning, what is the process? You get up, you read the papers, you look at, watch TV, listen to radio, figure out. And then there's several competing stories in the news. How do you pick what story have to jump at you, or do you craft it? How do you pick among all these different things that you hear, listen, and read about? Tell me a little bit about the process, the creative process, and the interaction with day's events.
As I said, there are no rules. There's no recipe for that. I wake up, I do a little bit of exercise. I'm thinking about the current news, which one is top. And I began thinking, well, where's the absurd in it? But then again, suddenly it comes like a flash. What a great joke. That's it. Do it. And it becomes easy as pie. And there are some that I'm sure there's a great cartoon hidden in that story, but I can't for the life of me find it. And you start scratching and you start thinking, let's try this one. Let's try. I said, Jesus, if I ever make it, it'll be a great cartoon, but it's quite hard to get a humorous drawing out of the story, particularly if the news are violent or they're massacre, violations, rapes, things like that. It's very, very difficult. You might as well avoid those themes. Unfortunately, when they become a national scandal, you can't avoid it. So you go for the abstract drawing or something like, gee, what sorrow, what have we done wrong, things like that have no humor in it, but it's a way of avoiding that story without ignoring it.
Yeah, and I guess it's also a palliative, right? It's a humor as a healing element, something that when you portray. So let me get technical here. In preparation for this conversation, I asked myself, what are the different tools that a political cartoonist might use? Exaggeration, analogy, hyperbole, irony, ridicule. How do you pick among all these different conceptual tools to kind of distill the story into a cartoon? How do you say, oh, this is something that I can exaggerate. This is an irony. I can use a hyperbole. I can ridicule. How do you choose that?
All of the above. You go by feeling. Sometimes the story draws itself. Or you ask yourself, how can I top that? And you realize, well, it seems funny, but it's quite tragic. And there's your cartoon.
This is where I guess reality goes well beyond fiction, I think.
Yeah. It's surreal.
Let me ask you, for example, when you portray López Obrador, former President López Obrador, as a savior, some sort of Jesus-like figure and things like that, what are you thinking about? Where did you get that idea? For example, oh, this is a guy that I can portray as a ridiculous Jesus, for example.
Well, let me tell you, it's a guy I dislike intensely, so intensely that I think you have to restrain yourself in order not to show your hate for that guy. Because if you show hate in your cartoons, you give them a free pass and you are the one who looks bad.
Right.
So you have to detach yourself a little and says, well, where's the funny side of it? This guy is obviously a messiah-like, firebrand, demagogue, whatever you like. In fact, once he left office, I try not to draw him often because I think this is a guy you dislike intensely and you are dedicating practically 1/4 of your life portraying him. What an homage. You go for the minions. You go for the guys behind them that don't get the cartoon because he's the star of the show.
Right.
And you make fun of them, but not in order to avoid lampooning him. So in order to undermine his support. Because, yes, you can make fun of him lots of times. When he was president, I did. But then again, you start saying, well, this ain't working, but you're making him more than he is. Try to see where his Achilles heel lies and go for it.
Yeah, this leads me to the next question, and that's exactly the point. Do you think that mockery, derision, irony, ridicule, whatever you want to portray as a humoristic tool, can truly move public opinion and political views? I mean, is it possible to change public awareness, consciousness through political cartooning? I mean, is it possible that people may see that we're living in ridiculous times by exactly showing the ridiculous nature of what's going on, the irony of reality, and deride it and mock it?
Well, one can only hope. But you'll be deluding yourself if you think in the end you'll do that. It doesn't happen. There's a great cartoon by Sir David Lowe, which was Britain's most celebrated 20th century cartoonist during World War II. He said, don't portray Hitler this way as a big ogre, a bloodthirsty, a tyrant, a guy to fear, because that's the image he wants to portray. portray him as a dumbass, as an idiot, as a ridiculous, impotent, sexually frustrated little miserable guy, because that's what hurts him. He wasn't all wrong. When the Soviets overtook Hitler's bunker, they invited some British journalists to visit the bunker. And they opened a safe that Hitler kept there. And inside the safe, there were several David Low cartoons with a lot of annotations below them saying, when we conquer England, I want this guy, this bastard shot, I want him hanged. I said, wow, what an homage to a cartoonist. I mean, the most dangerous man in the universe was thinking about getting revenge on a cartoonist. He must have been a great cartoonist, and he was. I believe ridicule is your best weapon, yes.
That's it. And that's exactly the point I was going to make. I think authoritarian figures, dictators, people who have a big ego, who are kind of narcissistic like that, like Trump and Lopez Obrador, those kinds of figures, they don't really feel that threatened by academics who argue with reason, who present data and analysis. I think a bigger threat is perhaps cartooning them, showing their ridiculous nature and exhibiting their insecurities. I remember those cartoons of Trump with small hands, based on some. So I think that your craft is a check on authoritarianism, because it's a way to respond to those tendencies that we see today, both in Mexico and the United States and beyond. I mean, it's a form of resistance. I don't know if you see it that way, but I think it is an antidote to authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's like that Hans Christian Andersen story, The Emperor Goes Naked. That's the point of the cartoon. You cut them down to size.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You show them as they are, not as they would like to be seen.
I guess it's a way of speaking truth to power. It's a way of checking them, but not the way I would do it as an academic and a critic. It's a different approach that I think may be more effective, because you are mocking them and ridiculing them and really exposing their true vulnerabilities. And I suspect that they would hate you, a political cartoonist and humorist, a lot more than they would hate me, an academic.
I'm not going to find that out, but nobody likes to be mocked, and certainly not politicians who have a big ego.
How do you fight a narcissist if not by...
That's right. Yeah, of course, by shattering his image. A great Mexican cartoonist called Abel Quesada once said that cartoonists tell the truth by making lies. Every cartoon is a lie. If you put Trump as a shepherd, well, he's not a shepherd, but it's a lie what you are seeing in the cartoon. But you're telling a great truth. You put his flock of sheep following him blindly, and he doesn't have sheep. He doesn't dress as a shepherd, but you get the idea. I mean, that's the metaphor one tries to put down in order to stress that point.
But I think you ultimately expose them, because I remember a cartoon, I don't know if it was yours or not, but I remember that, you get all these different corrupt politicians coming from other political parties against whom he obviously vented. I'm talking about Lopez Obrador. And then all of a sudden he baptizes them and then moves them into
that's mine, yeah.
And now they're clean. And so it shows the ridiculous nature.
Your sins are being forgiven. Yeah, that's it. I mean, you exaggerate the story, but the story is there. I mean, every corrupt politician that sided with Lopez Obrador gets a free pass. Some of them obnoxiously corrupt, evidently corrupt. I mean, we're not talking about, if you see it that way, this guy may be corrupt. No. This is corrupt, and he gets a free pass.
Right.
In fact, he gets a pat in the back.
He's been baptized and redeemed.
That's right. Yeah. All your sins are forgiven if you follow me.
And moving to something that I think it's probably in your mind, it certainly is in my mind, freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Where is Mexico today on that? I mean, we're seeing the weaponization of the judiciary against people who speak their mind, who speak truth to power. We're seeing people being punished and having to apologize for 30 days on Twitter or whatever. We saw what the governor of Campeche, Laida Sansores, did with his journalists who are now being supervised on a daily basis. Well, first, tell me what, in your view, is the state of the freedom of the press and freedom of expression in Mexico, and how do you think that's going to come to your shores?
I don't know, but we are far, far from where we were 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I thought we were an imperfect democracy. Now I think we are an imperfect dictatorship. You have to understand one thing. These guys are not Democrats. No Democrats in the American sense, no Democrats in the Jeffersonian sense, no Democrats in every sense. These guys are totalitarian by nature. They use the word democracy in order to hide the true intentions. Because if I say, hey, I'm going for the dictatorship of the proletariat, nobody would vote for them. When they say, no, I'm going for a wider democracy, well, democracy is an empty can where you can fill it with every kind of stuff you want. Kim Jong-un rules a country that calls itself democratic. We remember the German Democratic Republic. What was that? The communist Germany.
It's almost like a Rorschach test. It's a
That's
lot
right.
of ink, and everybody reads whatever they want in there.
But they realized after the failed Nicaraguan revolution that armed revolution isn't going to get them power. So they hide themselves in the democratic cloak. They win elections, and then from power, they try to undermine the democratic institutions in order to erase them.
Do you think that under the new judicial system in Mexico, the new judicial power, they may actually double down on weaponizing and mobilizing the judiciary against freedom of the press, affecting obviously your field, among others, within the journalism profession?
Yes.
And begin to kind of censor. And it's something that we obviously know as lawfare. You think that it might come to affect your craft?
Certainly. But I'll try to keep lampooning them as I can. But it's certainly in the textbook. This new judge, a Supreme Court judge, Lenia Batres, has said so. I'm pushing for a legislation in order to fine heavy fines on those journalists that doesn't tell the truth. Yeah, who tells what the truth is? We do. In fact, when confronted with the facts, López Obrador, he always said, I have other data. No, but these are the facts. By your own government, no, I have other data. He hadn't, of course. I mean, it's just, I have the power, you don't, you get screwed. That's about it. That's what they think. They believe, no, democracy is for the underclass to take power. That's democracy. The rest is bourgeois democracy. It's a fake democracy, but in the end, nothing changes. And we want real change. Yeah, I want change, but I don't want to into a dictatorship. It's no change at all, or at least it's no desirable change whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't know. You may still be too young, but when you think about retirement,
I'm 66. So.
We all think about retirement at some point. Are you trying to train the next generation of political cartoonists? Do you participate in workshops or activities where you can transmit your craft so that it can be preserved as a space of critical thinking about what's happening today?
No, I think becoming a cartoonist is a personal endeavor. You are your own teacher, your own pupil. You do three things. The first thing is you draw and you draw and you draw and you draw, always trying to learn to draw, and then you die. You never, reach the top. The second is you always look up to the cartoonists you admire. You let them influence you, certainly on your line, on your draftsmanship, and the way of thinking. You always find yourself a mentor. This is the cartoonist I admire. And you study them and you try to get a feel of what they're thinking, how they do it, whatever. And the third thing is you have to get away from them. Once you start to master the craft, you have to make a break from them because you don't want to be a bad copy of those great cartoonists. You want to be your own man.
Yeah.
So I think that's the process. No one can teach you how to tell a good joke. And no one can teach you how to make a funny line or a dramatic line or whatever kind of line. You do it on your own by trial and error, and you start making your own way into a style that you don't even know what will be.
Yeah. Let me go back to one thing that I want to explore a little bit more for a minute with you, and that is how you portray characters. Obviously, situations are interesting. I remember that particular situation when Beatriz Gutierrez Mueller tweeted, we're going to weaponize the new Supreme Court and the judiciary against critics. And then you portrayed her with, at that moment, I think she was apparently applying for residency in Spain, having picked a big fight with Spain, and this contradiction, this irony in the whole thing. And I remember that was really interesting because then you showed the new Supreme Court Chief Justice as a little dog that she was walking around.
He dressed himself as a dog, so I might as well unput him.
Right. And so when you think about Trump, Rubio, Lopez Obrador, Putin, Xi, the Pope. You look at the individual, forget the situation, the circumstance, the news, the story for a minute. When you look at the individual, how do you go, oh, this is a feature I would highlight? Because your drawings are very consistent. Once you start, Trump is usually portrayed with his dyed hair, blonde and kind of coiffed, and the little hands and the long tie. How do you say, oh, this is a good image and I'm going to use that? And then you seem to repeat that image. What strikes you about characters, not so much the story?
Well, those are props and those are, like golden cookies to cartoonists. For instance, I remember Vicente Fox, former president of Mexico. He had a mustache, he was tall, he wore cowboy boots. Those props, well, they drew themselves into the cartoon. It was quite easily. The same thing with Trump. Little hands, the toupee with the horn blonde hair and things like that. But that's not where the secret lies. And I'll tell you a little professional secret in order to get a good cartoon. Have you ever noticed how those adoptive sons start resembling their adoptive parents?
Yeah.
How come? I mean, genetically, they're very different. And yet you see them, you're the spitting image of your father. How come? Well, where the mind plays a little trick. Your soul or your personality, or you believe in the soul, whatever, your spirit, it's like a little guy controlling your mind, but you don't know that. And the facial features that it controls are your eyes and your mouth. You, Tony, have an expression that you not may be aware of it, but everyone knows, and I said, that's Tony, because that's that symbiosis between eyes and mouth. So people think, no, if this guy has a big nose, then I'll paint him with a big nose. If this guy has a big chin, I'll draw him with a big chin. No. Look for that expression that it's typically him. How do you get that? That dance between eyes and mouth, and you'll get it. After that, you have to consider that you do not only portray the face, but the body. For instance, in that cartoon of Beatriz Gutierrez Müller, you have to show her proud, defiant, arrogant. So you arc her spine and gesture and everything. You try to
Those up in the air.
Yeah, up in the air, arrogance. In order to portray the attitude you want, you see in her with the entire body. Many cartoonists rely on the face and then they just stamp off the rack body on them. That's not a great cartoonist. I see a cartoonist that always puts them as, like they're, some kind of dwarf with the shrunken trousers or things like that. They want to lampoon them, but she's the one getting lampooned. And they say, hey, seen that many times. It's quite boring. No. Go for the attitude. Go for the politician as a whole.
I think it reminds me a little bit of when Augusto Lopez, an ally of Lopez Obrador, for example, now in trouble through, what you call and things like that, is often portrayed as a vampire.
Yeah.
I guess you have to look at the face and you have to say, oh, this kind of lends itself to being portrayed this way, especially because he's an individual who's lived off public resources or resources from society. It's easy to sort of picture him with a cape, the fangs, the things like that. I guess.
Well, in his particular case, he's the spitting image of Al Lewis. You remember that comedian that portrayed Grandpa Munster?
Yes, correct.
He must be his twin brother. So when he made news, when people start recognizing him, that's Grandpa Munster.
But at the same time, that tells me that you're also constantly be reading history, historical figures, and things like that. So you can make those similes, those comparisons, and be able to kind of capture the historical character, like Grandpa Monster, for example, with Adán Augusto López. So your knowledge of the cultural environment and history has to be very vast as well.
Yeah, well, that goes for every profession. I mean, the more you know, the more you can use it in your work and the more it becomes relevant. I only make funny pictures and that's about it. They won't make such an impact as if you put layers on them. You have to know this in order to get the joke. Have you seen that little daily tales? Tells you more in the cartoon than the mere punchline, things like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
One last question as we close the podcast. How do you think artificial intelligence is going to change your profession?
I don't know, but it amazes me. I think it's going to change every profession. It'll be irresponsible for us not to ponder what will become of our job with these artificial intelligence things. The first exams I've seen, they all take the Walt Disney look, like the Pixar look, I say, I can beat that. You can always distinguish which cartoon was made with artificial intelligence and which is not. But as time progresses, it'll be quite different. I mean, you can put your style into a computer and the computer can start drawing perhaps better than you with your own style and perhaps with a different point of view than yours.
And there could be fake cartoons.
And you wouldn't know it. For instance, in the near future, every video evidence presented in court can be dismissed because you can say, hey, that's fake. I didn't do that. That's artificial intelligence. How can you tell them apart?
Right. Well, Paco, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you. It's interesting. I actually think of you as a historian, not just a journalist and political cartoonist. I think in your work, there is evidence of Mexico's current modern history, really. So I really appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us.
Tony, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Forgive my broken English. It's my second language, as you can see, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Fascinating conversation. The Judah Leigh Allen Mexico Centered podcast is brought to you by the Baker Institute Center for the U.S. and Mexico, which seeks to have a meaningful impact on the U.S.-Mexico relationship through binational policy research and solutions, and by convening leaders who can bridge the world of ideas and the world of action. Special thanks to Judah Leigh Allen for her generous support of the work that we do here at the center. This episode was produced by Tony Payan with support from Karina Zimo. AV production was led by Kevin Young. Be sure to visit us at bakerinstitute.org/Mexico to learn more. And thanks for listening.